Hope and Support in Difficult Times, the Jewish Wisdom for Facing Cancer and Chronic Illness, brought to you by Cancer Wellness Center, Sharsheret, and JCFS Chicago. My name is Savina Chacheva, and I'm the Program Director at the Cancer Wellness Center, and I'm so glad that you can all join us here tonight. For those of you who are joining for the first time, I would just like to share a little bit more about the Cancer Wellness Center and the services that we have available here for you. The center was founded in 1989 as a nonprofit organization with the mission to help anyone touched by cancer find a way forward. Each year, our free counseling services, support groups, and health and nutrition programs serve over 2,000 community members of all ages and backgrounds. People with cancer, family members, friends, and caregivers all come to us to connect and cope. Our services, which are both virtual and in person, include education programs like the one today that aim to help you navigate the varied challenges that come with living with a cancer diagnosis. Wellness classes like yoga, meditation, nutrition, exercise, and more that provide a holistic approach to healthy living. And support services, which include counseling for individuals, families, couples, children, and those bereaved, as well as support groups that are designed to help our participants manage the mental and emotional impact of cancer. If you would like to learn more about the center and connect to our free programs and services, please visit cancerwellness.org, and the link will be included in the chat. Thank you again, and now I would like to welcome Sharon from Sharsheret.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sharon Levine, and I'm the Midwest Program Manager at Sharsheret, which, for those of you who don't know, is a national Jewish nonprofit organization that provides personalized support, life-saving education for individuals and families impacted by breast cancer or ovarian cancer, or people who are at increased genetic risk. Sharsheret is here for you before, during, and after a diagnosis, and all of our services are free, confidential, and available across the nation from your home. Whether you've been diagnosed, have a family history, carry a genetic mutation, or are just seeking information, we're here to support you. Our team of social workers and genetic counselors can help you understand your risk, prepare for appointments, and make sense of test results. We also have a very wide range of resources and supports, and I'll list a few. The list is extensive, so it's not limited to these. We support newly diagnosed individuals. We have thrivership resources, programs for those living with advanced ovarian cancer or metastatic breast cancer, as well as support for caregivers and loved ones. Our social workers and our genetic counselors provide mental health counseling and genetic counseling, and they really try to meet people where they're at. They help identify what the callers are looking for, what they need, and they're able to provide those resources. So we have information and packages that help people with the cosmetic impacts of treatment, parenting through cancer, thrivership resources. We have fertility and family planning, guidance, nutrition and wellness resources, financial subsidies, and Sharsheret began as a peer support group. Our peer support network is extensive at this point, and the social workers are able to make very intentional matches with peer supporters should one want that. So whether you're facing cancer or supporting someone who is, or simply looking to learn more about your own health, Sharsheret's here for you. In a moment, I'll post all of the links for upcoming events and contact information if you'd like to connect for support, or if you're looking for volunteer opportunities and ways to reach us. But first, I'm honored to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Dr. Joseph Ozeroski. Rabbi Dr. Joseph S. Ozeroski is rabbinic counselor and chaplain for JCFS Chicago. He is also an adjunct professor at Spertus Institute for Jewish Learning and Leadership, as well as the Academy for Jewish Religion in Los Angeles. Rabbi Ozeroski was cited by Chicago Jewish News as top Jewish Chicagoan of 2013. and received the Rabbi Mordechai Simon Award from the Chicago Board of Rabbis in 2014. He served as president of the Board of Rabbis from 2015 to 2017, and now serves and um, now serves as immediate past president of Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains. An engaging, nationally known teacher and speaker, Rabbi Ozrowski has served congregations in Pennsylvania, California, Minnesota, and the New York area. Rabbi Dr. Ozrowski is a board certified chaplain. He received his undergraduate degree from Loyola University of Chicago, his rabbinic ordination from Skokie Hebrew Theological College, and his doctorate from Lancaster Theological Seminary. He has served on the Jewish Federation of Chicago Board and on the North Shore University Healthcare System Institutional Ethics Committee. A prolific author, Rabbi Ozrowski co-authored Common Ground in 1998, has written numerous articles. His first book, To Walk in God's Ways, Jewish Pastoral Perspectives on Illness and Bereavement, is considered a standard in the field of Judaism and pastoral care. Rabbi Ozrowski is married to Ashira Rappaport Ozrowski, has 4 children and 19 grandchildren. And I'll let him tell you about some extra good news about more that he's added to this bio, this impressive bio. So with that, I turn the floor over to you, Rabbi Joe.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate it. It's really a pleasure to be here to work with two wonderful organizations with whom I've worked before, and I'm looking forward to working again. Cancer Wellness Center does amazing work locally. Sharsheret does amazing work nationally, and I'm so happy that JCFS has a partnership with both groups. And I have to, since we had commercials, I got to put in a commercial as well. My program, the chaplaincy program, is part of the Community Services Division of JCFS, and we offer support to the Jewish community and beyond in a number of different ways: bereavement and loss support, addiction and recovery support. We're in the schools training safety, training staff, training students, and we also are involved in this chaplaincy program that I help to manage. So if you would like to talk to somebody on the issues of on spiritual issues, spiritual care, we have a team of wonderful chaplains. We don't charge for it, and we're available to you. So please be in touch with us. I will try to put something in the chat before I'm done as far as JCFS. Just jcfs.org. Go to our website, and it's all there. You know the old story about the rabbi who says, before I begin my talk, I'd like to say some words. I'd like to give a speech before the speech. Two things I want to mention. First of all, I want to dedicate my words tonight to the memory of my dear son-in-law, Yosef Newman. It's been about 2.5 years since he died from sarcoma of the chest. He was he had cancer, and he had treatment for it. And he and I were very close. He died in Israel. I was actually there when he died 2.5 years ago. I was in the room when he died. We were visiting. I was not expecting it to be that way, but that was key. And it's the funny thing is that he was writing for a year and a half already these lovely blogs, which included stuff about the Torah portion of the week, as well as Hasidic Torah, Hasidic Torah. And we all thought, this is great. You should publish this. And at the Shiva, we discovered that he signed a contract with a publisher before he died, 3 weeks before he died. And the book dropped this past week. The book is out. And it's called Even Higher, a cancer patient's faith-filled journey. It's really his journey, both the Hasidic Torah as well as his experience of being in treatment for cancer. And I'm going to put the book here in the this is the publisher's link, Mosaica Press. You can order it online, but actually those who were in Chicago, Rosenblum's called me last Friday and said they got the book in too. So if you're in Chicago, you can buy it at Rosenblum's. Maybe Kesher Stam has it too on TUI, I don't know, but Rosenblum's and Skokie has it, or you can order it online at that website. So I'm dedicating this in his memory. He taught me how to face things, and many of the themes in his book are the themes I'm going to share tonight, though I'm not using his sources. I've got my own sources for things that I've developed over the years, some things that were in my first book, some things that I came up with on my own. We're going to do some journey into a deep dive into some Torah sources together. We're going to be dealing essentially with the themes and dimensions of spiritual support when facing cancer and chronic illness or serious illness or something beyond that. Let me go over what Savina said and embellish that just a little bit. The way we're going to do it tonight is we are going to be recording tonight's talk. In fact, we already are recording it. The recording started. That's what they always say on the Zoom meetings, right? And you have to sort of check it off, make sure, yes, I heard that, I read that, thank you. Very good. So we are recording the first part. However, those of you who know my teaching style know that I like interaction. I like questions, I like comments, I like thoughts, even arguments. I don't mind, really. It means you're engaged with the material. I like engagement. What we're suggesting, so that is always welcomed, and that can be recorded. There have already been some requests for the recording. Some of our partnered synagogues in our JCFS Synagogue Community Partnership Program have already asked for it. They want to see this. They're very eager to see what the three of our organizations came up with. However, you may not choose during the recorded section to share your own story. And usually I don't mind at all when people share their own stories, but you may prefer not to while it's being recorded. In order to make this a safe space for people to share their own stories, after the didactic, it's not all didactic, it's going to be interactive as well, but after the text part of the session, we're going to turn the recording off. And we hope to have some time afterwards. We've scheduled in a good deal of time for this, which once we turn the recording off, you may feel more comfortable sharing your own story, your own journey, or your family member's own journey, loved ones, friends' journey, dealing with chronic illness, with cancer, with other things, and that will not be recorded. That's how we're going to be organizing tonight's session, okay? I'm going to share my screen now and open up the sources. They should be coming on. Come on. There we go, right now. Okay, this is what I've started. We're going to be, although I know some of you, I have the pleasure and privilege of knowing some of you, and I recognize some of your names, and some I don't know, and I hope to get to know you either tonight or in some other way. But I know that some of you are familiar with the Hebrew, and some of you are not. I'm not going to assume everybody knows the Hebrew, so I'm going to be teaching mostly from the English, and I apologize for those of you who know Hebrew and might have enjoyed a session more based in Hebrew, but we want to make sure we're inclusive and get everybody in. So I'm going to be teaching mostly from English. Occasionally I will make reference to the Hebrew. I will be translating it, but if I say something either from the text or from my own schmoozing that is a Hebrew term that I don't translate, please feel free to interrupt me and correct me. I don't mind at all. It's not an insult. It's a way of bringing people in and engaging them with them. One other thing, it's hard for me to monitor the people raising their hands. So if you can raise your hand electronically, and I'll allow that, or you can use the chat. I'm going to ask either Savina or Sharon, whoever is actually doing the tech part, please do me a favor and monitor the chat as well as the hand raising. And if I need to stop and bring somebody in, invite somebody to share, please let me know, because I'm happy to do that. During the didactic part, I'm going to ask for to facilitate this, to stick to things that come from the text itself. Like I said, you may not be comfortable sharing personal stories during the text session. That's why we're recording it. But if you have questions about the text or something we're actually studying, please feel free to engage. I like that. I don't mind it at all. Hopefully we'll be able to finish it. If we have to skip things, we'll skip things. We will certainly manage. Okay, everybody ready? We're going to do deep dive. Jewish wisdom for facing cancer and chronic illness. We're going to start with a psalm. Psalms were ascribed to King David, though he didn't write all of them. He started the process of writing them. Some of them came earlier, some of them came later. But Psalm 130 is a very popular psalm for people who are dealing with illness, or people who are praying or thinking about or trying to send good vibes to people who are struggling with illness. From out of the depths I call you, O Lord. And you'll understand why when we read this. Lord, listen to my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness. Therefore you are revered. This is my own translation, by the way. I wait for the Lord. My soul waits, and in God's word do I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than watchmen for the morning, more than watchmen for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord. For with the Lord there is mercy, and with God there is great redemption. And God will redeem Israel from all of its iniquities. So dealing with difficulty, with suffering, with asking for help, asking for somebody, a higher power to be with us is not a new thing. It goes back thousands of years. It's in the tradition, it's in the scripture, and we're going to be seeing various dimensions of it. But Psalm 130 seemed to me at least like a good place to start. Here are some of the themes that I was able to distill. Okay, question number one, where might God be in dealing with illness? Okay, I don't assume that everybody in this call believes in God. I'm not assuming anything, frankly. You may believe in God, you may have a strong belief in God, or you may envision God in some way. This is where the God of the 12-step movement becomes significant, the higher power, the God of our understanding. I'm not here to preach to, I'm not here to try to convert you to anything. I'm here to teach some Torah and to suggest that there's some Jewish wisdom. So where might God be in dealing with illness, in dealing with suffering? So here's a great place to start. Genesis chapter 18. You may remember this. Vayirah Elav Hashem, God appears to him in the terebinths of Mamre. Does anybody know who him is here? You can unmute yourself and say, who's the him here that God's appearing to? Anybody remember? Nobody? Okay, I'm not going to keep you waiting. Plus, I'm taking up our own valuable time here. It's Abraham, as in the patriarch Abraham. And if you remember what Abraham did, Abraham had just circumcised himself. Abraham brised himself. That's what he did. He was a late 90s-year-old gentleman who brised himself. So Abraham is sitting in the terebinths of Mamre. I never knew what terebinths were. Elonei Mamre. The Hebrew root Elon in modern Hebrew is oak tree. So it's probably a tree of some sort. It's a terebinth. I never knew what kind of tree it was. So Abraham is sitting under the shade in Mamre by his tent. And God appears to Abraham as he stands in the tent door in the heat of the day. Then Abraham looks up, verse 2, and he sees, and these three men were standing over him. We learn later on the men are angels. We don't know that yet. Abraham certainly doesn't know that yet. Okay, so Abraham is an elderly guy who just had a bris, did it to himself, and he's in pain. He's suffering, and God appears to him. This is the first Bikur Cholim, the first visit to the sick we have recorded in the Torah. And it's a great source for how we deal with the sick. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But also, where does God fit into this equation? Let's take a look at the Midrash Tanhuma. Okay? Midrash, for those of you who know, is rabbinic commentary on the Torah. Some of it's organized by laws, and some of it's organized by narrative. This is narrative. So this is the rabbinic interpretation. This Midrash is about 1,500 years old, give or take. Let's see how the rabbis understood God's visit to Abraham. Okay? The Hebrew starts, Kevan shenikala love. When God revealed God's self, when God shows up, the Holy One stood and Abraham sat, as it said in verse 1, and Abraham was sitting in the doorway. And it's typical rabbinic thinking. If Abraham was sitting, God must have been standing. It can't be the other way around, right? But look at how they do a deep dive into this. It is the custom of the world that when a student is sick and the teacher goes to visit, then other students go in first and say, there's a delegation of the teacher to the house of the patient. The Hebrew shlichut harav leveito shel choleh. There's a delegation of the teacher. There's an entourage of the teacher who wants to visit the patient, meaning that the teacher wants to visit the student. And the Hebrew says, "Vakadosh Baruch Hu eino kain," the Holy One, not so at all. Listen, follow this, please, with me. When Abraham was circumcised, Abraham brised himself and was in pain from the circumcision. So God told the messengers, and the word malachim means both earthly messengers as well as heavenly messengers. And that's the word the Midrash uses. It's the word the Torah uses as well. We don't know that Abraham doesn't know they're not human yet. So God tells the angels, my buddy Abraham, my buddy Abe isn't feeling so well. Could you pay him a call, please? Go visit him, please. Pay him a call. But before they arrive, God actually comes in first. As the Torah says in verse 1, and God appears to Abraham. And only after that, in verse 2, does Abraham lift his eyes and see the three beings there with him. Is there no greater humble one than this? Briefly, what do you learn from this midrash? Anyone willing to dive in? It's okay if you don't want to engage, but I thought I'd give you the chance. Okay. There are several messages that come out of this midrash. One is that God shows up. There's something in the chat. Okay. I see something in the chat. Okay. The importance of Bikur Cholim. That's Sharon's point. Good. Excellent. Yes, the importance of Bikur Cholim. It's a big mitzvah. It's my favorite mitzvah. I think it was Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav who said there are hundreds of mitzvot in the Torah, but everybody should pick one or two that they would like to be good at. This one is mine, visiting the sick. It's what I do for a living. I do the professional version of it as a trained chaplain. But I like the volunteer version. I've trained volunteers as well. So God shows up. That's half the battle, just showing up. That's number one. Number two, look at the attitude God comes with. God shows up and God even beats out the angels. God sends the angels to go visit my buddy Abe, but God says, I'm not going to wait for them to get there. I'm not going to let them be the delegation and announce me, God's here. No. Actually, God says, I'm just going to show up before they get there, which is what happens. God shows up and only the angels get there. They're nachschleppers. They get there a little bit later. And thirdly, look at this last line here. Is there no greater humble one than this? God comes with an attitude of humility. So visiting the sick, God shows up and God's there and God's present and God comes with humility. Something we could all learn. We human beings, we often tend to be pretty arrogant about stuff. We think we're going to help them, we're going to save them, we're going to fix them, this, that. No, actually, we just want to be there. Presence. Presence is the key, just being present, which leads me to the last point. If you look carefully, and the question I often ask is, what does God say to Abraham? And part of the answer is that it's a trick question, actually. And I won't try to embarrass anybody. God doesn't say anything to Abraham. You follow the text from the Torah, as we said it earlier, and follow the midrash, the rabbinic teaching, God doesn't say anything. It's a matter of presence. God just is there. So where is God in sickness? God's there. We're going to see examples of that a little bit later on when we get to some of the Talmudic texts of it. But God's there. We may not think God is there. We may not realize that God is there. We may not be cognizant of God. We may not care that God is there. But from the Jewish point of view, God is there. God's with us in times of difficulty, in times of illness, in times of suffering. So that's where God is. This is one of my favorite texts. So let's talk about suffering. What does the Torah say about suffering? Now, there are religions in the world that are predicated on suffering. I'm not here to speak about Buddhism or Christianity per se. I'm not a spokesman for any of them, but I know a little bit about both of them. I mean, Christianity, I'm not going to get into deep theology, but the base of Christianity is the suffering and torture and death of their God, of Jesus. So it's predicated on that. In some of the Eastern religions, suffering has redemptive qualities. You may find, elements of that in Judaism, but that's not what we're predicated on. So what meaning does suffering have? Well, people think, well, I got to suffer and, just chin up. But actually, the Talmud has a very different approach. Let's take a look at this. This is one of my favorite texts, okay? There are three narratives, and they're all connected to each other. Literally, they're all written in the same style, but they all have differences, okay? This is in Tractate Brachot, page 5. Rechi bar Avla fell ill, and Rabbi Yochanan went to visit him. Yochanan, by the way, was a healer and a pretty remarkable guy, as we're going to see when we get to the end of the story. This is story number 1. So he's sick, and Yochanan came to do this Bikur Cholim visit. Yeah, I'm going to visit my buddy here. So Yochanan says to Rav Chia, are your sufferings dear to you? Chavivin alecha yisurim. Are your sufferings dear to you? Do you like suffering? Do you like suffering? Is this good? And so Rav Chia said in Hebrew, lohein velo schara. Nope, not them, nor that reward. No, I don't want this. I don't care about this. I don't care if I'm rewarded for it. I don't like this. What's the Dr. Seuss line? I don't like this. No, I don't. Right? So Rabbi Yochanan said to Rav Chia, Havli yadech, give me your hand. And he gave him his hand and he raised him. Okay. There's already some very deep thinking here as well. Clearly, the idea that suffering is not necessarily a desirable quality in Judaism. That's the first point. But what is desirable? How does the story end? The story ends is that he gives him his hand. That's kind of the mantra. That's the punchline of the story. We're going to see it three times. Yochanan gives Rav Chia his hand, and he heals him. He raises him. He lifts him up. That's the literal meaning of the Hebrew there. He lifts him up. Give me your hand. That would be the title of the story if the story had a title. The Talmud doesn't work that way. But if we had to title it and take it out of context, the title would be Give me your hand. All right, that's story number one. Story number two. Story number two. Rav Yochanan once fell ill, and Rabbi Chanina went in to visit him. So now the healer is sick. This, by the way, is true of life. So we may think either professionally, people like me, or personally, people who are just voluntarily visiting those who are ill or caretake for loved ones, we may be on the other end of that pretty quickly, actually. We may be the ones who are sick tomorrow. We don't know. So that happened here. Yochanan the healer fell ill, and Rabbi Chanina went to visit him. So the dialogue is very similar with one major difference. He said to him, Chaviv and Alech and Yisurin, are your sufferings dear to you? Yochanan, now on the other end of the spectrum, replied, Lo hein v'lo scharan, not them and not their reward. So Chanina pulls out of Yochanan. He says, give me your hand, Havli yadech, and he gave him his hand and he raised him. Same story, same ending, but with one twist. The rabbi is commenting on story number two, asked, why could not Rav Yochanan raise himself? He's the healer, right? He's the healing guy. He's the chaplain, right? He's the rabbinic healer. He's got the master's in social work and the board certified chaplaincy, right? Why couldn't he heal himself? And they replied, Ein chavush, a prisoner cannot free himself from jail, from prison. Already you have another element in this story. So part of how we deal with suffering is we need the other. We need people. We need community. We need partnership. We talked about God being present, but God doesn't seem to be in this story at all. Not even in the third one, which is the longest one, which I'll get to momentarily. But the idea that when we are suffering, when we are dealing with chronic illness, when we're fighting cancer or any other type of chronic illness, we can't do it ourselves, and we're not expected to do it ourselves. So we need somebody, even if we're the ones who are doing it to everybody else. When we need help, it's okay to ask, and okay for somebody to reach out to us, take our hands, and free us from the prison of suffering. Now comes the most dramatic version of it. Rabbi Eliezer fell ill, and Rabbi Yochanan went to visit. So Yochanan is feeling better now. He must have recovered from whatever it is. Okay, and now there's an interesting narrative that's not in any of the other stories. Let's follow this. So he noticed that he was lying in a dark room. Rav Yochanan, the visitor, the healer, noticed that Rabbi Eliezer is lying in a dark room. And Yochanan bared his arm, he pulled his sleeve up, and light radiated from it. I'm not going to try to explain what that means. It could mean a lot of things, but I'm just going to sort of take the text as it presents itself. Is that physical light? Is that spiritual light? Is that emotional light? I don't know what it is. But somehow Yochanan's skin, his face, his body, his personality, his persona lit up. Then he noticed that Eliezer was weeping. This is his attempt to be a chaplain. Whether he does a good job or not, I'll let you decide for yourselves. So Eliezer is crying. He says to him, why do you weep? Is it because you didn't study enough Torah? Are you crying because of that? Surely we learned. The one who sacrifices much and the one who sacrifices little, you do a lot, you do a little, have the same merit, provided that the heart is directed l'shem shamayim, to heaven. In other words, you can do a lot, you can do a little, it's all good as long as your heart is in the right direction. So don't cry. But maybe you're crying because of lack of sustenance. You're impoverished. Is that why you're crying? Not everybody has the privilege of enjoying two tables. This, by the way, goes back in the rabbinic period, in the 2nd to 6th centuries, people were pretty poor, pretty impoverished. So, their homes were very humble, dwellings. So having two tables is considered a luxury. We don't think twice about having multiple tables in our homes. For them to have one table was a big deal. Two tables, that's a luxury. So he says, maybe you're impoverished. Not everybody gets to enjoy two tables. Is it because of lack of children? You didn't have kids? This is the bone of my 10th son. This needs some explanation. Yochanan lost 10 children. And they did not have cell phones with pictures. They did not have photo albums. They did not have online photo, Google Photos or the Aura app that you can send photos to other people. They didn't have, so how do they keep memories of what they've lost? He kept a tiny little bit of bone, tiny little bit of shred of the last son, the youngest son that he lost. So are you weeping because you don't have 8 children? I lost 10 children. This is the bone of the 10th one. Are these good pastoral approaches? Not so sure. I would question them, but let's continue the narrative. So Eliezer replies to Yochanan, he says, I'm weeping on account of this beauty that is going to rot in the earth. He's talking about Yochanan, who had this beautiful persona that lit up the room. And he says, I'm weeping because you're going to die, and I'm going to die, and we're all going to die. He's dealing with his mortality here. So Yochanan says, on that account, you've got a good reason to cry. And they both cried together. Yeah, death, mortality. Yeah, you're going to die. I'm going to die. It's worth crying over. Let's cry together. And in the meanwhile, he said to him, are your sufferings dear to you? And Eliezer replies, not them and not the reward. And he said to give me your hand. And he gave him his hand and he raised him. So there are a lot of extra themes that come into this last narrative. But the thing that these 3 narratives all have in common with each other is the Jewish attitude towards suffering is actually, suffering is not a desired state. This is not where God necessarily wants us. God isn't even in this narrative, by the way. But implied is that God doesn't want us to suffer, and it's not the desired state. No, I don't want to suffer. I don't like this. I don't care if I'm rewarded for it. I don't want this. And within that comes mortality and the fact that whether Yochanan was a very good chaplain, I'm not sure as a chaplain I would ask such questions. I think even as a volunteer Bikur Cholim visitor, if I was visiting somebody who was sick just as a layperson, I don't think I would ask that. He assumes too much. It's better to do what God did in the Abraham story and just be there and listen. Don't ask questions and don't talk. He's talking too much, but okay. But the point of the story, I think, where you get is that the response to suffering is community, is connection. And that's part of another theme that Judaism offers to us. Give me your hand. If you want to help somebody, offer them your hand. That's really what it comes down to. And Michelle post, maybe God is the light in the 3rd narrative. Yeah, I like that. That's good. Maybe God is indeed in the light in the 3rd narrative. God shows up as a reflection of Yochanan. Usually the other way around. We're the reflections of God, the image of God. Maybe God is a reflection of Yochanan. Yeah, maybe. Maybe God is in the light there. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. Okay. So we deal with suffering by reaching out to each other, by lifting each other, by lifting up each other, and maybe sometimes having frank conversations and sometimes not having any conversations. But the bottom line is that we can't free ourselves from the prison of suffering. We can't necessarily fix every illness. We can manage some, we can't manage others, but with the connection, we might be able to ameliorate some of the suffering. Okay. If you have any other comments or thoughts, either raise your hand and we'll see you, or put something in the chat. I am trying to monitor the chat. So as I did for Michelle, as I did for Sharon, I'll quote you for everybody. Now, next dimension, okay? Illness as an opportunity. Now you might think, Rabbi Joe, wait a minute. Are you nuts? What are you talking about? Hey, illness is tough. You just talk about suffering, some very profound stuff. What's an opportunity? Whatever. I'm sitting here in bed and I'm sick. I just came from chemo. I just came from radiation, and I've got to be overnight in the hospital, and I am sick and I'm vomiting. And what kind of opportunity are you talking about? but yet it's another dimension, how we deal with our illness. And I'm just giving you a number of dimensions. I'm not going to say that everything I'm going to share works with everybody in every situation. What I am doing tonight essentially is giving all of you some tools that come out of our sacred tradition, outside of the sacred texts of our people, that the rabbis and the rabbinic literature and the scriptural stuff that I'm sharing with you, they were onto something that might be helpful to us. And that's part of the way I'm teaching it tonight. Okay, so what's an opportunity here? I came up with two possible opportunities. One that you might expect but not share, and one that you might share but not expect. Okay, Song of Songs, according to tradition, written by King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, in his youth. Samchuni b'ashishot, rabduni b'tapuchim. Stay with me dainties, refresh me with apples, for I am lovesick. Cholat ahava ani, I am lovesick. It's an odd term. It's a romantic song, the story of two lovers with each other, and they sort of talk to each other from a distance. That's Song of Songs. Some of it's pretty erotic. We're not doing that part tonight. But the idea of ahava, cholat ahava ani, I am lovesick. So the Midrash of the rabbinic commentary on this verse gave a really interesting explanation. Let's take a look on this verse. I am lovesick, says the Knesset Yisrael, says the community of Israel to the Holy One. What does the Jewish people say to God? Because the two lovers in Song of Songs and rabbinic thinking are not just lovers, people loving each other, but they are examples for the Jewish people and God who are in kind of a love relationship, and sometimes it's not a love relationship, but in this case, it's symbolic of it. So Jewish people say to God, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, may all the diseases you bring upon me begin only in order to cause me to love you. And the commentary means to return me to a better state. This is something my son-in-law would have said, actually. He sought opportunities. He talked about the mountain that God lovingly placed in front of him. And in the last chapter, he talked about the mountain feeling like Mount Everest. And in the chapter that I wrote after he died, I wrote the second to last chapter in there. I talked about how maybe he didn't make it past Mount Everest. Maybe he was always at Mount Everest. So the idea of illness having a spiritual opportunity is one way to look at it. That for some people, for my son-in-law, this may not work for you, but it works for many people, actually, that illness could be an opportunity to look at one's spiritual life. That in spite of the physical debilities, one might find an opportunity to feel closer to God. That's how the rabbis look at this. They have lovesick. It's part of the relationship. If the two lovers are exemplars or metaphors for God and the Jewish people, so we may look for lovesick means we may find an opportunity within our sickness to find a way to love to God, to be closer to God. And we talk about God already being there. That's the Abraham story. Well, now we're going to try to find our way back to God that way. That's one possibility. Again, it may or may not work for you, and I'm not saying that you have to do it, but it's one tool. But there's another opportunity as well. Very different. Let's take a look at this so I can get it all in here. This is the end of Genesis. Jacob is already in Egypt. They've all down in Egypt. Joseph is the prime minister, and Joseph is basically taking care of his father-in-law. He's the prime minister, his father, but he is he's the caregiver. He's the caregiver, and his father is sick. So, it came to pass after these things, and it was said to Joseph, "Behold, your father is sick." This was after Jacob gives that famous blessing to his grandchildren, and the grandchildren are part of this picture. In a different setting, I have a whole session on end of life that comes out of the last chapters of Genesis. This is just one small piece of it. You'll invite me back someday, and I'll give you that session. And Joseph took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay, so they note the prime minister's aides say, "Mr. Prime Minister, your father is sick. Joseph, I'm going to visit him." But look at how the Talmud actually reads this. This is really interesting. I'm going to read it in Hebrew. Ad Yaakov lo havi chusha. Until Jacob came along, there was no sickness. Ad Yaakov by rachmi v'havi chusha. Came along Jacob, he asked for some divine mercy, and there was sickness. As it says, and they told to Joseph, "Behold, your father is sick." Now, the scriptural basis for this is that this is the first time in the Torah, in Jewish scripture, that the word sickness is mentioned. So the rabbis are saying, well, it's the first time sickness is mentioned. Maybe it's the first time there was sickness in the world. That's what the Talmud says. Until there was Jacob, there was no sickness. Comes along Jacob, Jacob davens, he prays, there was sickness, okay? Now, the question then becomes, how do we interpret this passage of Talmud? The Talmud, again, goes back about 1,800 years. It's the rabbinic commentary on the laws of the Judaism, but also of the narratives of the Torah. So, the commentaries on the commentary. So that's how we work in Judaism. There are commentaries on the commentary in Judaism. Two major commentaries, Rashi. His name wasn't Rashi, his name was Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, but those were his initials. If David Letterman had a list of top 10 rabbis, Rashi would be on there. Rashi lived about 1,000 years ago in what is today France. He was a vintner, he was a farmer, he made wine. There's actually a wine today called Rashi wine. It's not the wine he made, it's in honor of him. But Rashi also wrote the classic commentary on the Torah and the classic commentary on the Talmud. So if you're doing a serious study of Torah or of Talmud, you really can't do it without Rashi's commentary. It's the starting point for everything else. And then there's Tosfot. Tosfot were Rashi's grandchildren and the schools they founded around them in Western Germany and Eastern France. And they commented on the commentaries. So the Tosfot commentary suggests that we should take this passage literally. There was never any sickness in the world. And if there was, it must have been minor, or maybe there was surgery, like Abraham with the circumcision. Who am I to argue with the great rabbis of 1,000 years ago? If they said it, there was never sickness, maybe there was never sickness, but it's kind of hard to accept. I would say like this, it could be that people got sick and they had cancer or a stroke or heart disease and didn't have the language for it. They didn't have the nomenclature for it. So it could be. But Rashi, the grandfather, actually has a different approach. He does not deal with the question of whether one should take this passage literally or not. It's not an important question. He doesn't deal with it at all. What Rashi says is something different. Basically, Rashi says that Jacob took the opportunity of being sick to get his affairs in order. And that's what he did. Again, if I gave that longer session, Jacob actually does an advance directive. I can show it. I'm not going to show it to you here, but it's in the Torah where Jacob makes his wishes. He wants to be buried in the ancestral burying ground back in the land of Israel, land of Canaan. He tells his son what he wants, and he does an advance directive. He blesses his children. He blesses his grandchildren. He gets his affairs in order. That's the opportunity that when we're sick, besides the spiritual opportunity we might have, we also have the opportunity to take care of business. Take care of whatever is important, take care of to make sure our affairs are in order. We learn that from Genesis, from our ancestor Jacob and Jacob's extended family. All right, any comments or questions or thoughts before I go ahead? Okay. So let's continue. Taking care of needs. Part of what we deal with illness is we take care of ourselves and take care of those around us. Those of us who are sick try to take care of ourselves. Those who are caregivers take care of ourselves, and those around take care of the ones we can take care of. This is a value in Judaism as well. This is one of the classic texts of Bikur Cholim, of visiting the sick. I'm going to include some of those classic texts here because I think they extend to cases of chronic illness. Visiting the sick with someone with chronic illness is a little bit different than somebody who's ill and going to get better next week, because this sickness, is not going to go away so quickly. With cancer, some people will be in remission, and some people will just manage it. Some people will get worse. We never know. It all depends on many different things. But taking care of needs is part of the mitzvah of taking care of the sick. And here's a great example. This is the Talmud in Nedarim, in a longer section dealing with taking care of the ill. Rabbi Chelbo took ill. Rabbi Kahana went and proclaimed Rabbi Chelbo was sick. Okay, and no one came to visit. So Rabbi Kahana got mad. He said, you guys, what's going on here? He didn't use those words, but he said, don't you remember when our Rabbi Akiva, who was the teacher of all them generations earlier, Rabbi Akiva was one of the top 10 rabbis as well, 24,000 students, thousands of students. And Rabbi Akiva, what happened when one Rabbi Akiva's students took ill? And don't you remember the story? None of the sages, none of the students came to visit. One of Rabbi Akiva's students, Rabbi Akiva's student, he had a student who got sick. And Rabbi Akiva realized that nobody came to visit. So Rabbi Akiva himself, third line, Rabbi Akiva himself went to visit the student. Rabbi Akiva had thousands of students, went to visit his sick student. We don't even know the name of the student. He's an anonymous student. And Rabbi Akiva went himself. And because Rabbi Akiva swept and sprinkled the room, I want to emphasize the Hebrew here. Come on. Bifil shekibdo v'rivtzo. Rabbi Akiva swept and sprinkled the room. Chaya, the student recovered. Keeping in mind, they didn't have hospitals. They didn't even have, wooden floors or vinyl floors or, any of that stuff. They had dirt floors. And they didn't have Mr. Clean, and they didn't have the types of things we used to clean our homes. But they would sprinkle lime or some chemical or something on the floor, and they would do whatever they would consider to be disinfectant. So Rabbi Akiva went and swept and sprinkled the room. Rabbi Akiva went, it was not beneath the great Rabbi Akiva, one of the top 10 rabbis of history on Letterman's top 10 rabbi list, with thousands of students, and he visits his anonymous student. So the student recovered. The student calls out, "My master, Rebbe," he says, "Hechyatani, you have made me live. You've brought me life." Following this, Rabbi Akiva went and taught, he lectured, "Whoever does not visit the sick is like a shedder of blood." That's a pretty serious statement. If you don't visit the sick, it's if you've killed them. Let's put that aside, because that's kind of a strong language, and I don't want to focus on the language here. But there are several things we learn from this passage. One is that part of the mitzvah of taking care of the sick is taking care of the physical needs of the ill. We think, and I'll never forget when I was first studying this stuff, 40 years ago, I was doing my doctorate. So I was part of a cohort of mostly Protestant ministers. And this was back in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And they had us do this is before I trained to be a chaplain, before I had taken CPE, but they had us do some hospital visits. Then we had to write verbatim reports, like a verbatim account of the visit. I said this and they said that, and how did it go, and this and that. We analyzed that. So in one of the what I wrote when I visited non-Jewish patients at St. Joseph Hospital in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and in my account I wrote, "How's the food?" And these Protestant guys jumped all over me like, "How can you say that? It's not spiritual." I said, "I don't know about you. In my religion, food is spiritual, right?" It is. So the fact is, and this is before I had encountered this particular passage in the Talmud. So taking care of the physical needs, according to the Talmud, is spiritual care. So taking care of the needs is important. That's part of the mitzvah as well. This passage is also a great example of what we read earlier about imitating God, that just being there and showing up is part of that. One other point I want to mention, the words for sweeping and sprinkling, kibdo v'rivtzo. Hebrew's a great language, and I'll teach you a little bit of Hebrew here if you don't know it. The word to sweep up, lechabed, also means to honor, kavod. It's the same word, okay? Which suggests that taking care of the physical needs of the patient is an honorable task, that it's okay to clean up the schmutz. Now, it's interesting. When I was doing my research, first encounter this, one of my mentors showed me another version of this text. It's the Netziv's version, it's a 17th century or 18th century version of it that actually had a slightly different narrative here, where Rabbi Akiva did not sweep and sprinkle the room himself. There was a shamash, there was an attendant there, caregiver we call them, and Rabbi Akiva's presence caused the caregiver to sweep and sprinkle the room. What's the difference between the two versions, besides the story part of it? The difference is that in our situation, so if you're visiting a hospital, it's not our job to clean up the bedpans, but it may be our job to make sure the bedpans are cleaned up. In a facility, skilled nursing care, hospital, whatever is inpatient, it's our job to advocate and do what we can. Now, we got to do it in a respectful way. The people who work there are usually underpaid and usually not treated so well. So we got to do it respectfully. But if something's not happening that our loved one, our friend, our family member needs, it's our job to make sure it happens. The other version, the version we see in front of us, is probably more relevant to home care, where we're taking care of a loved one at home. And then we do have to, clean up the bedpans and sweep up the schmutz. And the Talmud is teaching us that that's an honorable task. It's part of the mitzvah, and there's spiritual value in taking care of needs, our own needs and those around us, and making sure that that's done. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments or questions before I continue? And please don't be ashamed. I don't really mind. Is everybody feeling confused enough? Okay. All right, let's continue. There's another element, something that we saw a little bit earlier, and now we're going to embellish it just a little bit more: connection and community. We talked about it in terms of the Talmud on suffering. This is a Midrash Rabbah. It's one of my favorite Midrashim on visiting the sick. I'm going to do it in Hebrew and English because the Hebrew is great. Damar Rav Huna said, Kol mi shemevakar tacholeh, whoever visits the sick, pochtin lo echad mishishim becholio, takes away, lessens a 60th of their illness. Now, 60th may not be an exact fraction, although we find the term a 60th in other places, and some of you think about it, you will know where we find it. Those who keep kosher may know about this. In a kosher home, in kosher facilities, we keep meat and milk separate. Okay, separate meat and milk, separate meals, separate dishes, separate pots, all that. What if you're cooking a nice chicken soup on Friday night and you're stirring it, and there's matzo balls and noodles, really good, and a drop of milk falls in, and oh my God, there goes Friday night. And did you lose the chicken soup? The answer is not necessarily, because Jewish law has a great deal of wisdom and common sense to it. If the amount of liquid in the milk is less than 1/60th of the soup, the liquid in the meat liquid, then you're still glot kosher. That's in Jewish law. Okay, so a 60th is a rabbinic fraction. If you visit the sick, you take away a 60th of the illness. Now look at how this goes on. Utvela Rav Huna, so you'll forgive me if I'm lapsing into my yeshiva sing song. It's how I was trained. Utvela Rav Huna, so they asked Rav Huna, wait a second, in Cain, if that's so, Yalu Shishim, let 60 people, it's 1/60th, right? Let 60 people go up and visit the patient, the Yeridi Imam Lashuk, and they'll all go down to the mall together. They'll go to Orchard or Northbrook Court together. That's what the Hebrew, they'll go to the market together, really. And he'll get better, and then they'll go to the mall together. Okay? Amar Lahem Shishmi said 60. No, it doesn't mean that. It's not, you can't get 60 people and he'll be cured. She'll be cured. It doesn't work like that. It only works if the visitors love the person they're visiting with their souls. What does this sound like? You'll recognize the passage, loving your neighbor as you love yourself. So the taking away a fraction, an actual fraction, only works if you have a relationship, there's an empathy, there's a connection. But even if you don't have it, marvichin lo still helps. So you may not have that relationship, but it still makes a difference. So it may not be a 60th, it may be 120th, doesn't matter. The visit takes away a fraction of the illness. Connection, community, things happen. By the way, there is research out there that talks about how this actually works. There's growing research that's done at the National Institutes for Health. I don't know if the current administration cut that budget. I have no idea. It's done at Stanford. It's done at Duke University. There are studies that are done that show that the connection actually plays a role in the healing process. One study that I recall of heart patients on the West Coast, several hundred, that they're belonging to a church and attendance at a church or connected to some social, spiritual connection actually played a role in their recovery, that the chances were increased that they recovered. It's a great commercial thing. People go to shul on Shabbos, to go to synagogue on Saturday. But that's not the reason I'm mentioning it. The point is the connection and the community actually make a difference, that the rabbis 1800 years ago were into something that we're just beginning to discover. We have clinical proof for today. So connection and communities. And in fact, even beyond that, let's take a look at the Tractate Smachot is one of the later tractates, probably 6th century. This was the practice of the Chavurot. There were associations or committees in Jerusalem. They are probably talking about Second Temple Jerusalem 500 years before this passage was written, but the tradition was passed on that in the Second Temple period, they were what we called committees, Chavurot. Some went to the house of the mourners, some went to the house of marriage, some went to the bris, to the circumcision, and some went to gather up the bones. The gathering up the bones was an ancient practice that we don't do nowadays. That after the first burial, a year later, when the flesh had decomposed, they would rebury the bones in a family, niche someplace. We don't do that. We haven't done that for a long time. But they had committees to do it in those days. They may have even had a Bikur Cholma visiting the sick committee. We don't have any records of that, but they may have. It's possible. Okay. Next element, prayer. Now, we'll define prayer in a minute, but because it may mean one of several things. But here's a great passage in the Talmud. Rav Dimi said, this is the continuation of the Rabbi Akiva story we had earlier. This actually comes right afterwards. I'm just placing it separately here because it's a different topic. When Rav Dimi, who used to go between Babylon and Israel, back and forth between the Jewish communities, he shows up in the middle of hundreds of Talmudic discussions. So when he came, he said, whoever visits the sick causes him to live, and whoever does the visit causes him to die. He's paraphrasing the phrase we had earlier there. Now, the rabbis were bothered by the same thing that probably bothers you. What do you mean causes him? What it was go? The Hebrew word is goreim. What do you mean cause him? Does this mean that if you visit the sick, you will pray for them that they may live, and that whoever does not visit the sick will pray that they will die? Would you think this? Typical rabbinic fasting. If it's this, if that's got to be that. But it must mean that whoever does not visit the sick will not ask for mercy, neither that he shall live nor die. So we want you to pray for people who are sick. It's in the Talmud. Part of the mitzvah of helping somebody who's dealing with any kind of illness, including chronic illness, is to pray for them. Now, what could prayer mean? I'll give you a couple of examples. Prayer could mean, when you ask most people, what's the prayer for the sick? And most people say it's the Misha Berach, the Jewish prayer there's a Jewish prayer for the sick. Okay? And it's said in synagogues. You don't need a synagogue to say it. You can say it at home. I have often said at the bedside when I was doing hospital work, I would say it at the bedside, but it's considered the prayer for the sick. But the problem is it was only written in the 14th century, maybe 13th century, maybe even earlier. But the Talmud was written in the 5th century, 2nd through 5th centuries, 6th century. So there's a 700-year gap between this passage that we just studied and the prayer. So what was Rav Dimi thinking of here? I suggest that the prayer he's talking about is an extemporaneous prayer. This is the second dimension of prayer, is that you can pray in any words you want. Some people are more comfortable using a book and reading the words there, but you can also pray in whatever word you like. Please, God, help so-and-so who's struggling with cancer. They're going for treatment today. Guide them through it. When we train lay visitors, certainly professional chaplains, we're trained to integrate the words of the person that we heard in the visit, integrate them into the prayer and lift that up to God. But you can say anything you want to, anything that works. It's perfectly kosher. And there's a third level. What if you're not comfortable? I'm not a praying person. I don't go to synagogue. I'm not sure I believe in God. I don't know what I'm going to do here. Do I have to pray? And the answer is giving a blessing, a good wish, is another dimension of this. So if you're not sure or it's not appropriate, maybe I believe in God, but the person I'm visiting doesn't. So I'm not going to pray for somebody who doesn't care about the prayer. Offer them a good wish. Tell them, sei gesund, get well, be well, stay well. A blessing. Blessing is always a good thing. It's also a form of prayer in Judaism, and it meets the standard that the tradition has. And you can say any words that work, that you and the person you're visiting, your loved one, a friend, a stranger, whatever it is, anything that they and you might be comfortable with. But certainly if you're the patient, hearing, being prayed for can be very, very powerful. Knowing that people in a synagogue are praying for you, or people anywhere are praying for you, can be very, very powerful. When I pray with patients at the bedside, it's usually, I won't say always, sometimes I don't do it with everybody, because for some people it's meaningless, and I don't do it that way. I'll give them a wish, a blessing. But for some people, it's very powerful. So another way to face chronic illness, especially with cancer, is to pray with somebody else, or know that you're being prayed for in the community, in shul, in synagogue. We're coming now to the last passage, okay? And it's 8 o'clock, so we're right on time. We're going to leave time for people to react and either react to the text or your personal story. Here's the last passage, something they call spirituality. I need to define spirituality. Spirituality is not necessarily the same as religion, although it could be. Spirituality is dealing with the big issues: purpose, meaning, hope, suffering, being connected to something bigger than we are. The 12 steppers talk about it in terms of a higher power, something bigger. People use the term the universe, which might be God also. God is certainly a connection, but it doesn't have to be God. Organized religion is one of the major ways that we carry out spirituality, but it's not the only way. It doesn't have to be the only way. You can do it through nature or music or art or a lot of other things. I would suggest, by the way, that in the Judaism, this is where we differ from other faiths, the community is a source of spirituality. And I've tried to show you some of the texts that actually teach us that from the Talmud, from the Torah, from rabbinic literature. But it could be God, it could be a higher power. Let's take a look at this last passage. This is the last of the text I'm going to be teaching. I'm going to do this in Hebrew and English. Amar Rabin Amar Rav. Rabin said in the name of Rav, Minayin shakadosh baruch hu zanet hacholeh. How do we know that the Holy One sustains the sick? How do we know that God sustains the sick? Shene'amar, this is from Psalms, Hashem yisadenu al eretz davai. The Lord will support him, meaning the patient, on his bed of illness. So Psalms teach us that God sustains us. The Amar Rabin Amar Rav, and Rabin also said in the name of Rav, Minayin shashchina shruya mimitato shel choleh. How do we know that God's presence, the divine presence, rests above the patient's bed? Shene'amar, and he quotes the same verse, the Lord will support him on his bed of illness. When I first came upon this passage many years ago, when I was researching this, writing my doctoral dissertation that became my first book, I was stunned. I was blown away by this passage because, first of all, it reminds us that God's in the room when we're with someone who's sick, whether it's their bedroom or certainly in a healthcare facility, in a hospital, in a rehab facility, in a nursing home. God's there. And if God's there, I need to think about what I'm saying, how I look, how I'm expressing myself. And I realized something else, something that we don't usually think about too much. If it's a facility, it's a hospital, a treatment center, and God's in the room, and God's at the head of the bed of every patient, that must make a hospital or a skilled nursing facility a very holy place. Because multiply God at the head of every patient there, and there are hundreds of them, so God's presence is really thick there. Now, we may or may not be aware of it, or conscious of it, or care about it. Or the patient, the loved one, whoever we're caring for, visiting, may or may not be aware of it or care about it. But the Torah says the holiness is very, very thick, and we don't usually think of a hospital or a skilled nursing facility as a holy place. But the Talmud says it is. Talmud says it is. So you don't have to define spirituality the way the rabbis did. But knowing that there's a spiritual connection, something bigger that we can glom onto that can help us through these difficult moments for our own illness, for the illnesses of our loved ones, can be a very helpful tool in dealing with illness. Okay, that's the text part of it. I'm going to end this part of it with a blessing to everybody, and I'll do it again when we're finished with the question and answer part. But my prayer and blessing for all of you is that whatever journey you're on, if it's your own journey dealing with illness, if it is someone who's a loved one to you, a friend, a neighbor, a family member, may you have support from the community, from however you define God, your higher power, from the people around you, from within and without, to guide you on that journey. And now I think we can